so disconnected from understanding what any sort of real struggle looks like, what it's like to be part of a dues paying organization. Um, I too read a lot of Anton Yeager. Been trying to get him on the show. It's partially me to talk about his latest book. We've had Anton on a few
Yeah.
times before. You remember that, Pascal? You were on those
course.
shows. The NGO, as you talked about, as you mentioned, has it displaced organized labor in a certain context when we think about trying to fight for anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big problem. I mean, have they displaced labor? I mean, I guess no, because at the end of the day, when it comes to economic questions, I mean, unions are still fighting for that, and they're the main ones doing that. But again, it's only covering members of these respective.
Yeah. I guess that's my point. It's only affecting.
Yeah, so it's
unions.
much more narrow, and of course, that has to do with the the decline in union density and all this kind of stuff. I saw a statistic in an article the other day that kind of shocked me. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I was shocked that there are more nonprofit employees in the U.S. today than there are manufacturing employees.
Damn.
Which is, and again, I can't cite the where that came from, but there's a recent Jacobin article.
I'll say this though: there's a lot of low-level jobs in nonprofits, right? Like I work for a nonprofit. If you work for any like homeless, drug outreach,
right,
all that shit's nonprofit.
Right. University is a nonprofit also.
Yeah, right. So I'd have to see how they're defining that. But even there, I mean, that's kind of a stunning statistic. So yeah, and I think there is a lack of experience of like what does this term organizing actually mean if it's being done well? And it's a term everyone uses. And what I hope to try to start to paint a picture in this article about Callaway was the things he did that were actually real organizing, what that looks like a little bit. But you can't glimpse that really from an article. And Adolph Reed has a great line. He always says that like people think organizing is like something that involves a bullhorn. It's really like 98% of the time that's not what it is. It's more. It's like
it's tedious.
How do you build relationships? How do you build bridges between groups and people? And like how do you network over time and find opportunities and build a base? And that's something you can't. It's not necessarily a bullhorn. So I think there is really a lack of that kind of experience over the long term, and is
that why the nonprofit is so attractive though, Paul? Is it because the nonprofit is there with the bullhorn, right?
And it's also, people look at the big moments like, okay, the mass demo after George Floyd, and again, mass demos are part of it. I mean, you had like the March on Washington, but it's like what was happening before the March on Washington is really what the important thing was. So we've had a lot of kind of explosions happen where these mass demos almost seem to come out of nowhere, but they don't really leave much afterwards. But I think people kind of look at, well, that's what organizing is like the mass demo that kind of just comes together and you're leading the chance sort of thing. But this experience of like, how do you build an organization and sustain it over time, whether it's a union, whether it's something else, or how do you use, something that was fascinating about Callaway, and I think A. Philip Randolph did the same thing with the sleeping car porters, is like, he built this union and the union was strong in its own terms and it delivered for its members, but then he turned that into an institutional home that could then be projected to be used for other things. And the sleeping car porters kind of was a critical home for like nurturing the early civil rights movement in the 40s and the 50s. The Teamsters in St. Louis, they use this institutional home that has people, it has some money, not a lot of money, but some money, has some resources, and turn that into this juggernaut that now could organize on local municipal issues, that could get candidates elected, all these sort of things. So I think that's kind of the task. And there's still a lot of opportunities for that. You're seeing it happen in smaller ways. You're seeing, with the new leadership in the United Auto Workers in a pretty short amount of time, them kind of being able to take over that union and turn it into a new direction, and possibly make more waves over time. But But I think that's the more interesting question of how do we do stuff like that? How do we do what Callaway was able to do, and have his hands in everything, and so we could go on more about that. But that union kind of took on every central issue that it could. But you need to have an organization to do that. You need some resources. It can't just be like scattered individuals, or it can't just be like someone on a podcast. Not that podcast.
No, you're right. I look.
And I think that's another, honestly, a big problem. And again, I'm saying this as someone, I used to do the Jackman Show, of course. I come on podcasts. I think they are important, but I think you're seeing now a generation of people who look at the leftist YouTube show as the doing of politics. And now it's like this subgenre is developing of like some certain shows, all they do is kind of talk about other shows.
Yeah.
And it's like, you realize this is not the
TMZ.
people who need to be organizing, or, this is not this doing politics per se. And I think people have kind of missed that, or like they look at almost like a podcast as a party that could like, well, if this person takes a position, like they could like move votes for something, or they could like start a movement. And I think that's a huge problem.
Pascal?
I think that's a very important point, talking about how podcasts are being viewed as a replacement for actual politics. I think it's a problem that we're seeing on the left in this moment of a vacuum of actual organizing, where people are not really like going to doors or meeting in movement halls to really meet people.